Hey guys, my name is CJ. Now this video is a slightly different one. I haven't really done videos on home appliances before, but this is still ultimately a tech and lifestyle channel, and I ultimately love looking at how tech can integrate into life. So today we're actually looking at robot vacuums, and more specifically a pretty cool one by a Chinese brand called Ecovacs. Let's take a look. Now I'm going to be the first to admit that I'm not an expert in all things robot vacuum related, but I have owned a couple in my lifetime. At the most basic level, robot vacuums are little autonomous machines that go around sucking up dust and dirt on the ground, saving you the effort and potential pain of having to do it yourself. Now some of the more common brands we hear of are iRobot with their Roomba brand, Samsung, LG, and even Xiaomi or Roborock. Now for many years, I've owned a Roomba model 805, brought funnily enough when I was on holiday in Hawaii at a Costco back in 2016. It's done well, it's a basic no fuss little machine, it vacuums dirt, collects it into its little dustbin, and then would make its way back to the little dock when it was done. Very reliable, it had basic lights to tell you when it needed emptying, and you could set different time schedules like an old digital clock. It didn't connect to the internet or your phone, and there were no fancy bells or whistles. It did the job, and that's all I cared about. So for so long, that's all I thought robot vacuums could do. That was until Ecovacs got in touch and asked if I wanted to check out one of their newer models, the Deebot N8 Plus. And literally after a few minutes of receiving it, unboxing it, and testing it, in Scott Forstall's words, was blow away. But the opposite, because this is a vacuum and it sucks instead of blow. But seriously, having come from a very basic, and you could even call it dumb robot, this Deebot was like I was teleported into the future. Externally, yeah, it just looks like any other robot vacuum. A circular plastic machine with a pressure sensor on the front and a little compartment on the back. Look closer and you've also got this little module on the top which houses a time of flight laser module to help precisely map out your floor so it knows where to go and where it's been. And unlike majority of robots, the compartment on the back is actually a water reservoir because it can even double up as a mop. Again,
I was blown away.
Then finally, it also comes with the fattest docking solution I've ever seen because it houses its main party piece, an auto-emptying dustbin. I mean, what?
Blown away.
Now again, if my excitement seems a little over the top, it's only because my own previous personal experiences is only with very basic robot vacuums. And look, you might already own a brand spanking new robot vacuum with all of these features in the last year or two, in which case, good for you. This probably isn't a big deal, but I'd hazard to guess that for majority of people watching this video, this could be your first new robot vacuum in a while or ever, and you'll probably have the same thoughts as me. So yes, a smart robot vacuum with floor mapping, floor mopping, and auto emptying, all pretty damn cool. And to top it off, it connects via Wi-Fi, so it can be controlled by your smartphone or even smart assistant like Google Home or Alexa. In fact, once it's been linked to an Ecovacs account, you can actually access your vacuum via any internet connection. So if you're off on holidays and you'd like your home to be cleaned in advance, well, you can do that too. But now that we've gotten over the initial excitement, let's actually talk about its performance. So to start with, the vacuum is primarily controlled via the Ecovacs app, and there's a decent amount of functionality to go with it. The setup is pretty simple. You scan a QR code on the robot, and in a few minutes, you'll be up and running. Now just make sure you've got an internet connection when you're doing so, because like I said, it does require the robot to be connected to an Ecovacs account. But once it's set up, the main screen will show any other Ecovacs devices you own and some basic status info. You can see the level of charge, whether it's connected to the internet, and it's also here you can quickly tell it to just auto clean the house or go back to the dock. But to really get into what makes this robot awesome, you gotta tap Enter Smart Cleaning, which then shows you and opens you up to a bunch of different modes and settings to adjust. Now, if you're starting it first off, there'll be a blank screen with a grid that it will eventually show your home's floor plan. It uses this little LiDAR module on the top to map out the floor, and it does require you to do a full cycle in order to map everything out. When the floor plan's done, it's actually pretty accurate too. And I definitely recommend doing this because that's really where the magic's at. Now in traditional robots, you would hit the clean button on the top and off it goes. It would go around, do what it thinks is the main floor, or basically run until it's almost dead and then return to the dock. Now, the only real way you used to control where it goes would be to use one of these little modules that cast a laser boundary so it doesn't fall downstairs or go to places that it shouldn't. But in the Deebot, if you've mapped out the floor plan, you can actually use the app to divide out your floor plan to different areas. So for example, you can set where the living area, the kitchen, the laundry, and the hallway areas are. If you live in multi-story housing, you can even map out individual floors and then allocate them specifically too. And it's smart enough to know where it is geographically on the floor. And from there, you can set it to clean very specific areas. Only want it to clean your living room? Just tap away and off you go. Want to clean just the laundry in the hallway? Tap away and off you go. Only want to clean a very specific spot in the living room? Well, you can do that too with the custom setting. You can even set out a specific cleaning sequence too for different areas. Maybe you wanted a Deebot to clean the living room last because there's a heap of stuff on the ground that you need to clear out. You can do that as well. Now the app sets up virtual boundaries for the robot, and in my experience, it's been pretty good at keeping within these limits. And it's only occasionally gotten lost whilst vacuuming, but these experiences were pretty few and far between. It would usually take quite a lot of new obstacles and tight spaces to confuse the little Deebot, and as long as you keep majority of loose objects like toys or shoes out of the way, it does a pretty great job of staying on track. Now, of course, there are slightly upgraded versions of the N8 available called the N8 Plus Pro or the T8 Ivy, and these models have a little extra camera module on the front that helps visualize these little objects and can actively avoid these. But honestly, the N8 Plus itself does a pretty great job of navigating this anyway. The main area it will probably lack a little bit is in identifying loose cables on the floor, but you'd best be moving them out of the way for any robot vacuum anyway. But back to the app. You can also control different functions like how many times you should clean an area, the suction power, and if you're using the mopping setting, how much water it uses. And you can even customize specific preferences for different areas. So maybe your kitchen gets particularly dirty and you need extra water. Well, you can tell the Deebot to use more water in the kitchen and do it a couple more times. Then if you've got carpet in the living space, then you can tell it not to use any water at all. There's so much flexibility, it's awesome. The app also keeps a log of when and where it's cleaned, so you can remind which rooms you've neglected. For me, that's usually the laundry or the hallway. Or I mean, you could of course just look at each room physically to see how dusty or dirty they are, but I think it's a really cool little feature. And again, it can be connected to both Google Home and Alexa, so you can simply tell Google or Alexa to just start and stop vacuuming, and even check if it's charging. And I think that's a pretty cool feature. Now let's talk about the auto emptying dustbin. This feature for me has been a revelation. One of my biggest pet peeves about robot vacuums is that the onboard dustbin is always so small where it would only take maybe 1 or 2 cleaning cycles before it has to be emptied. Pretty annoying to having to keep emptying it out. But with a Deebot, every time you perform a cleaning cycle, it returns to the dock and it'll automatically empty out the onboard dustbin into the dock. And it achieves this through 2 little suction tunnels on the base. It's basically like another vacuum built into the dock. But by being able to transfer the dust into a bigger space means you don't have to constantly empty out the robot to keep it going. And for me, that makes it a lot more convenient to use.
Charging.
I mean, my puppy Frankie hates it when it's emptying the dustbin, but I love it. Now each bag can hold up to 2.5 liters of stuff and it's rated for up to 30 days of collecting. I've had it for at least that amount of time and more, and I've barely filled up half. Now obviously if you've got a bigger home with more carpet and pets, it'll fill up quicker, but living in a small house with tiles, a big rug, a partner whose hair molts everywhere, plus a small dog, it's been more than adequate. It also comes with a spare bag in the box too, and really there are a couple of options. The bag itself has a little opening that you can slide up and down. If you're really trying to keep it cheap, you could realistically empty it out from this hole and then reuse it, but otherwise you're looking at buying replacement packs of 3 to 5 for about 30 Aussie dollars. I've even seen reusable bags online for about 30 US dollars, so factor those into your costs as well. Now in terms of performance, I've been really happy with how the Deebot N8 Plus has done. Now, as you can see from the map, it cleans in a very logical fashion in rows and does a great job of sucking up any loose dirt and dust. Its brushes are also slightly longer than my old Roombas, so it can reach and sweep a bigger area. It's also pretty quiet as far as vacuums go, maxing out at around 67 decibels, but more often less than that. And importantly, its wheels seem to be a bit heavier duty as well, and they do a better job of scaling different terrain. Now, my old little Roomba would struggle with rugs and floor mats, often thinking they were walls or objects to avoid, whereas the Deebot would scale them like a mountain goat on a rocky cliff. It's also smart enough to detect when it's on a rug and would automatically bump up its suction power to clean it. And because it knows when it's on a rug, it also knows not to go onto the rug if you've set it to mop the floors. So that way you won't end up with soggy rugs and carpet, which is awesome. Now it's also got a 3,200 mAh battery for up to 110 minutes of continuous cleaning, which admittedly is a bit less than some of their competitors with averages of around 5,000 milliamps, and even Ecovac's own T8 model, but it's been more than enough to do the main areas of my house. I mean, you'd need a pretty damn big house to use it all up in one sitting. But even if it did run low before finishing the house, it does have a function to head back for a charge and then automatically restart cleaning where it stopped when there was enough power. So for vacuuming purposes, the Deebot's been pretty great. But now let's talk about the mopping feature. I mean, it sounds awesome. I mean, who wants to mop floors? It's got to be one of my least favorite chores. With the Deebot, it comes with a little detachable plate that holds a sort of disposable microfiber cover. Kind of looks like a Chuck's actually. And it comes with a pack of further 10 microfiber mops in the box, which is convenient. But in the interest of reducing waste, you realistically can reuse these covers by washing them after a few mopping cycles. And I definitely advocate for doing this because if we can minimize waste, the better. But when the mop's connected, the robot automatically detects it and turns on mopping mode,
Mopping plate has been installed,
which basically activates the water reservoir. Now it's also important to know that you can't actually deactivate mopping and make it vacuum only if the plate's connected. So if you only want to vacuum, you'll have to pull this off. So for mopping, does it work? Well, yes and no. The Deebot definitely wets the ground and the mop definitely mops. But as for how effective it does little more than wet the ground and just smudge the surface. You also can't mix any floor cleaner into the reservoir to properly clean the ground. Well, I mean, you can, but Ecovac says it's not built for that and you could break the pump. They also don't recommend using it to mop up accidents either. So unless your floors are already somewhat clean and grease-free, the mopping function will do little more than wet the ground and wipe it a little bit. So despite how cool it sounds, I think it's not a particularly useful feature and definitely not an essential feature to have. But aside from that, the Deebot N8 Plus has blown me away. Again, as a big preface, my experience with robot vacuums up until now have been limited to older, dumb robot vacuums, and the Deebot is really my first foray into the world of, I guess you could call it, smart robot vacuums. Vacuums that are connected and improves on the classic shortcomings of the earlier models like small dustbins and just blind cleaning. The N8 Plus retails for 1,200 Australian dollars, but as of this video, it'll coincide with an excellent Prime Day deal with a pretty sweet discount, and often you'll find a coupon to get it for cheaper anyway. A link will be in the description below. It's definitely not cheap, but don't buy it because it's got a mop, but buy it because it's super customizable, connected, flexible, reliable, and has an auto self-emptying dustbin integrated with the dock. I love that feature. But what do you think of the Ecovac's Deebot? Would you spend that little bit extra for such a super smart robot? Let me know why or why not in the comments section below. Hit me up in the socials. And of course, thanks for watching. Give us a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, ding the notification bell so you don't miss out. Thanks again for watching. Stay safe and say good day to your mum for me. Cheers.